anybody else going Jingle Bells, Batman Smells in their head? Is it just me? Okay, fine. I don't know. Hey, good morning. I don't know if we have met yet or not. I hope that we have. But if we haven't, my name's Josh. I'm the pastor here at Church on the Drive, and I am so glad that you are here with us because we're continuing our series here in Christmas that we're calling Awkward Family Christmas. Because the truth is that holiday times can be just plain awkward. And I could think through a bunch of scenarios and a bunch of my own family history that I could point you to. You could probably come up with a whole bunch of stories of your own where Christmas or some other holiday was super awkward for a whole host of reasons. But I don't need any of that. All I really need is the evidence of the 1989 cinematic classic, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. That's all I need. That's the only thing I need for you. If you haven't seen the movie, basically it goes a little something like this. There's this guy, Clark Griswold, and then Clark Griswold has his whole family. Clark is expecting a Christmas bonus to pay for a pool he wants to put in. Spoiler alert, he doesn't get it. Sorry, but it's from 1989. At this point, spoilers are all out the window. All right. Now, to make matters worse, everybody comes over to his house for Christmas. Things are going like that. If you've ever had everybody over to your house and they stay for Christmas, you know what that's about. And then somebody else shows up that wasn't invited, Cousin Eddie. Cousin Eddie shows up with Cousin Eddie's whole family, and they are in an RV, and that's not the greatest RV, and so they wake up in the morning, and he's just there in his bathrobe out in the front lawn. So the whole movie has Cousin Eddie and Clark going back and forth, and it's just this awkward thing the whole time, and they kind of vacillate between, hey, I'm going to be really thankful that you're here, to, man, I wish this guy would leave, right? Back and back, like everybody's Christmas, I guess. I don't know. So I thought about all of this awkward family Christmas stuff going on, but you know, no matter how awkward Christmas gets, no matter how awkward any holiday gets, one of the best things about having everybody together for those holidays is that you get to hear those old family stories. You get to hear those old family stories about people you know. Maybe they repeat a few stories about you from when you were a little bit younger, maybe. But you also get to hear all the stories about people that you never even met, like the ones that you never met. I've got this great-grandmother that I have never met, and that's going to be important in a second, because she's one of those people that was so well thought of, so highly thought of, so highly respected by people, that when she walked into a room, men, women, and children all stood up. I know this because they tell me this story every year. She was a Pentecostal preacher, and she would go around doing all sorts of things. This was a woman without a high school degree. This was a woman without a car. But somehow, she did so many things for so many other people. And she led churches, and she did different things. She was so highly thought of that 60 years after her death, they're still talking about her like it was just yesterday. And they look at me and they go, "You remember when that happened?" And I said, I wasn't born for like 30 years after she was dead. But if you know what I'm saying, like this happens all the time. There's people that that are in our life or maybe not in our life, and they're part of our family, but maybe we never met, and this sort of thing comes up. It's one of the reasons I've gotten really into genealogies. Now, I know what you're thinking. Josh, we already thought you were really cool. But now to tell us that you're really into genealogies, that's putting the icing on the cake, yeah? But because I love genealogy so much, I want you to love genealogy so much. So we're going to play a game. Feel good? All right, so I have some 3 contestants that are going to come on up here. So come on up, contestants. 4, yes, here we go. Here we go. Let me tell you what you'll be playing for, a Hershey's milk chocolate bar. I know that you love that. I don't know how old this is. So you can stand wherever you want. No, stand far away from me so people can think I'm tall. All right. Okay, so real quick, let's say your name and, I don't know, a quick tidbit, your favorite hobby.
My name is Jason, and I guess my favorite hobby is probably coaching my kids.
That's a great hobby. That's a great hobby. Welcome, Jason.
Hi. I'm Lindsay. My favorite hobby is dressing exactly like Josh.
Okay.
I'm Stephanie. I can't be that hobby, but fun fact, I don't like chocolate, so this is gonna go well.
Well, she's going to tank the game. All right. So this is a game I wanted to call the Maury Povich game, but instead we're going to call it Who is the Father? And if you ever spend enough time watching daytime television, you'll know why that's funny. All right. So what I want to do first, before we do anything else, is I'm going to read something to you. Will you hold this microphone over for me? All right. So I want to read something to you. This is the genealogy of Jesus. So you who are sitting in your seat, and those of you who are joining us at home, you can play this too. This is the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of God, the son of Abraham. So now listen closely, because I'm going to ask you some questions. Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac, the father of Jacob. Jacob, the father of Judah and his brothers. Judah, the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. Perez, the father of Hezron. Hezron, the father of Ram. Ram, the father of Amminadab. Amminadab, the father of Nahshon. Nahshon, the father of Salmon. Salmon, the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Boaz, the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. Obed, the father of Jesse, and Jesse, the father of King David. David was the father of Solomon, whose mother had been Uriah's wife. Solomon, the father of Rehoboam. Rehoboam, the father of Abijah. Abijah, the father of Asa. Asa, the father of Jehoshaphat. Jehoshaphat, the father of Jehoram. Jehoram, the father of Uzziah. Uzziah, the father of Jotham. Jotham, the father of Ahaz. Ahaz, the father of Hezekiah. Hezekiah, the father of Manasseh. Manasseh, the father of Ammon. Ammon, the father of Josiah, and Josiah, the father of Jeconiah, and his brothers at the time of the exile to Babylon, of course. After the exile to Babylon, Jeconiah was the father of Shealtiel, Shealtiel, the father of Zerubbabel, Zerubbabel, the father of Abihud, Abihud, the father of Eliakim, Eliakim, the father of Azor, Azor, the father of Zadok, Zadok, the father of Akim, Akim, the father of Elihud, Elihud, the father of Eleazar, Eleazar, the father of Mathan, Mathan, the father of Jacob, and Jacob, the father of Joseph. Got it?
Yes.
Got it? All right. So, here's how this is going to work. We're going to put something up on the screen, and you're going to tell us who the father is. Pretty simple, right? All right, we're just going to go most points. Most points. So, our first slide, please. Nahshon or Amminadab? Who is the father?
Amminadab.
Amminadab. Who's the father? Amminadab. All right. That's very good. All right, let's pass it on down to Lindsay.
Okay.
All right, next slide, please. Who is the father, Abijah or Asa?
It's definitely Abijah.
Who is the father? It's Abijah. All right, 1-1. All right, Stephanie. Our next slide, please. Jehoshaphat or Jehoram?
I'll go with Jehoshaphat.
Jehoshaphat is the father. Wow, you guys are good. You guys are good. Okay, next one. Zerubbabel or Shealtiel?
Zerubbabel.
Oh, Shealtiel. All right, you still got a point, though, already. You know what I mean? All right, our next slide. Hezekiah or Ahaz?
I'm going to go with Ahaz.
Going with Ahaz. Ahaz is correct. Lindsay surging into the lead.
Pressure.
Who's the father, Eleazar or Elihud?
Eleazar.
Ooh.
What?
Ooh, close one. I switched it up. See how that is? All right. Who's the father, Ram or Hezron?
Hezron.
Hezron. Hezron is correct. All right.
Nice.
Here we go.
Like,
This of Jesus.
of Jesus. I'm going with Joseph on
You're
this
going
one.
wrong. It's God. Okay, moving on. All right, so Jason's our winner, everybody. Thank you, thank you, everyone, for playing. She doesn't like chocolate, anyways. Give it up for our contestants one more time. Thank you. Oh, Lindsay, can you give this to somebody? Yeah, it all works out. All right, so genealogies are fun. See, I told you. They're great. No, the thing about genealogies is that when you see them, you just get a quick snippet of a person, usually just their name. You see like kind of the time they were born in history maybe. Maybe you see how long they lived, where they lived at most. But you never really get to see the full humanity of that person, do you? You skip over the humanity of that person a lot of times, both the good and the bad, when it's just the genealogy, especially if there's no narrative to it. But I think if we dig deep enough, we all have backgrounds and we all have ancestors and we all have family histories and maybe even current relatives that make us proud and others who make us want to mumble when we talk about them, talk in hushed voices because maybe what they've done and things they've said and things that they did to us are a little bit embarrassing sometimes. Well, in that regard, I want to say this. I want to say two things. The first is, I want you to remember that everybody is made in the image of God, and everybody is valuable to God. Everybody is loved by God. Those are all true things. Nobody's perfect. Everybody's made in the image of God, so we don't want to just be done with anybody. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, if you've got an awkward family thing going on, you got awkward relatives, you got awkward current relatives or an awkward family history, you got a lot of baggage you bring to the table, guess what? Jesus too. Jesus also had some awkward relatives of his own. Let me show you a little bit. Matthew was one of Jesus' earliest followers, and he wrote down that genealogy that I just read. In fact, what was going on was after Jesus had died and had been resurrected, he came back and they talked a lot about all different things, and then he was gone again. And this first generation of Christians was trying to figure things out, and they didn't want to lose the story. And so as they all got older and said, look, it doesn't look like Jesus is coming back right now. We're going to be waiting a few more years, and maybe we won't be around by the time he finally does come back. Let's write this all down so it doesn't get lost, so it doesn't get corrupted or anything like that. And so they wrote down these different biographies about Jesus. And one of them was written by Matthew, who took all the stuff that he knew about Jesus, the things that he thought were proven, the things that he knew were accepted by other people. And this is how he started. He said, this is the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. It's easy to skip over that, but let's not do it, because Jesus, the Messiah, is an important thing to say. We talked about this a little bit last week. If you weren't here, you can go and watch it online. But essentially, the Messiah was a title that others had claimed every once in a while throughout history. It wasn't unheard of for somebody to be labeled a Messiah, but it was a more rare occurrence. It wasn't just like every 5 seconds somebody was saying, I'm a Messiah. But there were people who claimed it. A Messiah was somebody who was usually going about doing God's business of setting Israel right and fighting for God's people. And so Matthew calling him the Messiah early on, right here in the first line of his biography of Jesus, is important. He wants you to know who he is. This is the guy who changes everything. But then he says this, the son of David. That's not just because Jesus is the descendant of David. The son of David had become a title that was in frequent use around Jesus' time. Over the years, it had become a title that would be used by not many people because it had a lot of weight to it. Had a lot of weight to it. It was used for somebody who was supposed to be messianic, supposed to be a Messiah, but was also, they were going to be bringing in the kingdom of God that was a kingdom of perfection and righteousness. How'd you like to have that responsibility? So this idea that he's the son of David, he's bringing in this idea that he's bringing a kingdom of perfection and righteousness. And then the son of Abraham. You remember maybe the promise of God to Abraham. Abraham said, what do you want from me, God? And God says, I want you to go to this place and do this thing, and I want you to be committed to me, and I want you to follow me, and I will make you great. And Abraham said, okay, fine, I'll do it. I believe you. And God said, I want to bless the world through you, and I'm going to do that. All nations will be blessed because of you. That attaches here. Jesus is the one who's going to end up blessing all the nations. So God's covenant, God's promise to Abraham is fulfilled in Jesus. That's what Matthew wants everybody to kind of get understanding. He goes on and he talks a little bit about some of these people. Things are right for the first few generations, more or less. There's kind of a half-brother situation with Abraham's sons, with Ishmael and Isaac, and Isaac is the chosen one, Ishmael's not, so he kind of has to leave, and that's a whole thing. But other than that, it's, not too dramatic until you get here. This guy, Judah. Judah, the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. Now, this Judah is the same Judah, if you've ever heard the story of Joseph and his coat of many colors. If you've ever heard that story, Judah is one of the older brothers that throws him down in the pit. They were gonna kill Joseph. And then they say, well, maybe we shouldn't do that. Let's just sell him into slavery instead. Let's just sell him into slavery. We'll be nice. And so they do that. Same Judah. Well, Judah gets a little bit older, and he has some sons of his own. One of them is named one of them is named Onan, and the other is named Shelah. Shelah is the youngest, is the oldest. Shelah is significantly younger. That's important in a second. Well, is actually kind of a wicked guy. He's referred to as wicked. And before anything goes too far, he ends up dying early. But before he dies, he's married to a woman named Tamar, who's a Canaanite woman, a non-Jewish woman. That wasn't something they were supposed to be doing, but she was a non-Jewish woman. Maybe you've heard the phrase Gentile before. That's what that means. He's married to Tamar. But before he can have a child with her, he dies. God strikes him dead. And so, as was the custom of the day, Judah, the father-in-law, goes to his brother, to Er's brother, Onan, and says, Onan, you're the next in line. You need to go to your sister-in-law, and you need to make sure that she has an heir. You need to make sure she has a son. Now, this was done so that Er's name would continue on in the land of the living. This was important. Like in a time where you couldn't just look up a genealogy and couldn't Google all of this stuff, it was important to people that their name would be repeated in genealogies for years and years to come, because there was going to come a day when somebody wasn't going to ever say your name again. For some people, they believe that's when you truly died. Well, Onan says, okay, I'll do that, but he doesn't want to do that. He does not want to do that. Because what he knows is, if he does give Tamar a child, if she does conceive and she does have a child, then that child is going to be the inheritor of Er's estate. Here's why that matters in financial terms. Because the eldest child got a double portion of what the other children got. So if you had 2 children, everything was split into thirds. And the oldest child got 2/3. The younger child got 1/3. So Onan looks at everything and he says, well, if I give her a child, then that child is going to get Er's piece. And it's going to be a double portion. I'm going to be left with less. If I don't give her a child, I'm going to get my portion and his. He does the math. And so he uses her for sex, and then somehow figures out a way that she will not conceive. I'll let you go read the juicy details from Genesis 38 on that one. All right? But the point is, he doesn't want her to conceive. God sees this, and God is not pleased at all. Ultimately, Onan dies too before Tamar can conceive a child. Well, at this, Judah looks and says, well, I can't keep sending my sons over to this woman. Something's wrong with this girl. Two guys that have been with her are dead now. I'm not sending a third. So he says, look, here's what I need you to do. I need you, Tamar, to go back to your father's house, and I need you to dress in your widow's clothes. They had certain clothes they had to wear. Go dress in your widow's garments, stay there, live like a widow, do all that stuff, and things will be fine. And whenever Shelah is old enough, I'll send him to you, and we'll get married. You'll get married and all that. Sound good? Tamar says, fine. That's great. So she goes back to her father's house, lives like a widow, and then word starts getting to her after a few years. Hey, Shelah has grown up. Things are fine. Everything's going well. Also, your mother-in-law passed away, and your father-in-law is just now coming out of his grief time. She hasn't really seen anybody, hasn't talked to anybody. It suddenly dawns on her. She puts 2 and 2 together. He hasn't sent that third son for me. I'm going to get left out in the cold here. This was a patriarchal society, and as a woman, you had to be attached to a man. Otherwise, you might not live. You might not make it at all. So she starts putting two and two together and says, if he doesn't send Shelah over here to me so that I can be his wife and so that I can bear children, as I get older, I'm going to be in real trouble. And he has no intention of sending Shelah over here to me. So she hatches a plan. And to make a really long story short, her plan is this. She decides, I'm going to get dressed like a prostitute. And she covers her face as the prostitutes of that day did. And she went out and she sat down by a road where she knew her father-in-law was going to be going by. She tricks her father-in-law into having sex with her. And she conceives and ends up giving birth to two sons, Perez and Zerah. Now, how would you like to have that as part of your family tree? How'd you like to have that as part of your family story? And that's not all. We go on with some of this stuff. It's kind of crazy. There's another story not too long after this, just in Jesus' genealogy. Boaz, the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. So Boaz, and then there's Ruth. Now, here's why this is important. These are all great people. The problem with the genealogy stuff here is that Ruth is not Jewish. Ruth is not an Israelite. She's from Moab. And the people of Moab, we call them Moabites, they were supposed to be restricted and removed from Israelite community for 10 years by law. 10 generations by law. 10 generations? And here she is mentioned in the genealogy of Jesus? That doesn't make any sense. This is one of the reasons I think the truthfulness of the Gospels can be shown. Because if you were making up some kind of story about Jesus, if you were really making this whole thing up, you wouldn't include Tamar and Ruth. You wouldn't include them in there because these are people who are really messed up. These are people who shouldn't be in any genealogies. These are people that you would be embarrassed to include in your genealogies. Especially if you're going to be this Messiah figure who's going to come in and set things right for God's people, and you're going to usher in a kingdom of perfection and righteousness. How can you do that when your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother was Ruth, a Moabite? Well, Ruth and Boaz had a son named Obed, and then Obed had a son named Jesse. And then we find this out about Jesse. And Jesse was the father of King David. Jesse's the father of King David. Now you say, David's awesome. What are you talking about? David's the man. You remember like a man after God's own heart? That's what everybody seems to know about David. That and the slingshot thing. Remember David, he's awesome. He's got great stories. He's also got some other stories. He's got some other stories too. I mean, he ends up in a civil war with his own son at one point. His own son ends up dying and losing everything. On top of that, at one point, David was supposed to be out at war and all his guys are fighting, but he stayed back. And he looks and he sees this beautiful woman bathing. Instead of running away and getting away from all that, he just keeps watching. And then he makes sure that she's brought to his room. Now, we can parse hairs here, but split hairs here, or parse words, whatever we want to do. But when the king summons you to his room as a woman, there's something implied there. And it's kind of forced, I think, if we're being honest. I think you could make the case this might be a little bit of rape. And then when this woman becomes pregnant, her name is Bathsheba, when she becomes pregnant, David figures out a way to get rid of the whole thing. He says, I know what I'll do. I'll make it seem like it was her husband, but her husband won't go anywhere near her because he wants to be out with honor fighting in the battlefield. So David figures out a way to have him killed off. David renders it certain that this guy will die. He's pretty much a murderer at that point. Man. How'd you like to have that in your family tree? 1923. The guy who was a rapist and a murderer and an adulterer. Right there. This is Jesus' genealogy. He's the Messiah. He's the one supposed to be bringing a kingdom of perfection and righteousness. He's supposed to be blessing the nations. How's he going to do that with people like that in his family tree? And it wasn't just David. Then there was Solomon after him. David was the father of Solomon, whose mother had been Uriah's wife. Remember Bathsheba? That's her. So Solomon comes on the scene, and Solomon enlarges Israel's territory, grows this thing. It's huge. But the way he does it, he kind of sells his soul a little bit. See, one of the ways he enlarged his territory and brought relative peace so that he could do that was he made alliances and treaties with all the nations around. The way you did that in those days was you married somebody from that family. It was kind of seen as a symbol of that treaty, maybe even a trophy of that treaty. Well, when he married them, he also brought them in, but he brought their gods with them. What we find out is that Solomon ended up having over 700 wives, and they all brought their gods and goddesses with them, and Solomon built temples for them. At the end of his life, he ends up worshiping with them in some of these little temples and shrines. And these gods and goddesses that got brought into Israel, they became the sticking point. They became the stumbling block for the people of Israel from here on out. And ultimately, it's why God removes his hand of protection, and the people of Israel go into captivity. And then there was the next one, Solomon, the father of Rehoboam. So Rehoboam was the last king of the united monarchy of Israel. And he messes it up. He comes in, everything should be good, but he comes in and he's haughty, he's confident, he's arrogant. And they say, hey, look, Rehoboam, we want to have some conversation with you. Your father, he was taxing us a little too much. Can we talk about this a little bit? And he goes, no, we're not doing that. I'm the king, do what I say. They said, okay, well, we're going to do our own thing then. So Rehoboam is left with Judah and Benjamin, those two tribes down in the south. The other 10 tribes to the north become their own thing, called Israel, sometimes referred to as Ephraim. This is all in Jesus' family tree. Let's not forget about his mother and father, Jesus' own mother and father, Mary and Joseph, the two alleged fornicators who were producing a baby before there was a marriage. Jesus had an awkward relative situation, both in family history and current relatives. His ancestors were imperfect, and we also know that his mother and father were looked at kind of suspiciously. We even hear about his mother's cousin Elizabeth also saying that God was giving her a baby, and somehow her husband couldn't talk for a long time. It's an awkward relative situation. So if you have what you might deem or what you might call an imperfect family history or an awkward relative situation, here's what I want to say to you. Here's my advice to you. Here's how I would love it if you lived. If you're one of those people who says, I've got awkward relatives and I don't know what to do. Be like Jesus. That's the church answer anyways. But be like Jesus, man. I mean, think about Jesus here. Think about what he does here. Be like Jesus, because what Jesus does is he just is who he's called to be. He is who he's supposed to be. My question to you is, who are you called to be? In spite of, or maybe because of your family history and your current relatives, who is God calling you to be? And are you being that person? We can make excuses all day long. I come from this type of family. I come from this type of family. This is my family history. I got all this going on around here. I'm stressed out because of my mom or because of my sister over here. You can do all of that. My question to you is, are you being who God called you to be? Because that is what matters. Maybe you're here this morning and you're saying, look, to be honest, I hear what you're saying, but I am the awkward family member. I'm the one that other people don't want to be around. I'm the one that other people are kind of embarrassed of, or I feel like everybody's embarrassed of me. Let me tell you something. You're a child of God made in the image of God. God loves you very much. This church family loves you very much, and you're valued. But my advice to you is still the same. Be who God called you to be. Be who the God of the universe has designed and called you to be. Don't worry about all that other stuff that came before. Don't worry about what anybody else thinks of you. Worry about what God thinks of you. Because whether you're the awkward relative or you're the person with the awkward relative, here's what I want you to remember. Your relatives don't define you. Your commitment to God does. This is what it all comes down to. Your relatives don't define you. Your family history doesn't define you. It shouldn't determine any of that for you. Your commitment to God, or maybe your lack thereof, is what defines you. Because this is where we could kind of put it on its head, right? There's some of us who we're coasting on grandma and grandpa's faith years later. We know grandma and grandpa were firm believers in God. Mom and dad, firm believers. Loved God with all their heart. Followed Jesus. Gave as much as they could to make sure that other people would also follow Jesus. Went on mission trips. Did all the things. Set a good example. And some of us, we're just coasting. We're hoping that we can just ride those coattails right through the pearly gates. But that ain't how it works. Because your relatives, your family history, none of that defines you. Your commitment to God does. Look, our family history is something that we carry with us. And it can be hard to break away from, especially if you've got different addictions and family history stuff that's really painful. It can be really hard to break away from that. But with God's help, I think you can be okay. With God's help, I think you can write a new story in your family tree. I think there's something different that can happen. You don't have to be the addict that your father was or your grandfather was. You don't have to be the emotional abuser. You don't have to be that person. No. You can be who God created you to be. But the only way to do that is to make a commitment to God and keep it. So as you head into this week, I want you to do this. I want you to try to focus less on making everybody and everything around you perfect, especially your family. Don't focus on that. Focus more on being committed to God and letting God figure out the rest. Let me pray for you. Lord, we thank you for today, and we thank you that you have called us and you've said to us, hey, come be my child. Come be mine. Commit to me. In the same way you called Abraham all those years ago. You just said, hey, would you just commit to me? I pray for everyone listening to the sound of my voice that you would help us to commit to you with everything we have, everything we've got, that you would help us to just commit to you and quit worrying about our family history or any baggage that we might think we have. Lord, help us to just commit to you. Help us to be the people you call us to be. In Jesus' name, amen.
Hey, it's great to have been with you this morning. If you're new, thank you